Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm Senior Literary Agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Bearce.
And I'm author and writing coach Nicki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
Welcome to this episode of Wayward Writers. We're excited to have with us today Harold Underdown, who has been many things in publishing, and we are grateful to have him today talking about submission strategies. Stephanie, will you tell us more about Harold?
I'd be happy to. Harold Underdown has worked as an independent editor and publishing consultant, providing developmental edits and strategic consulting, and as an in-house editor with Kane Press, McGraw-Hill Education, Charles Bridge, and Orchard Books. He enjoys every part of the editing process, though he admits line editing can be a chore. I'm with you, Harold. Harold also enjoys teaching in a variety of contexts. He speaks and gives workshops through the Highlights Foundation and SCBWI's national and regional conferences. He wrote The Complete Idiot's Guide to Children's Publishing, now in its third edition. He founded and runs The Purple Crayon, a respected website with information about the children's publishing world at www.underdown.org.
So, Harold, you just gave an amazing class that I took and are going to be teaching at the end of January another class on submission strategies at the Highlights Foundation. And one thing I love about your classes is that you're thorough. You do research and you talk to different people, and I love that. I think it's amazing. And for those of you who want to check that out, you'll get a much deeper dive into submission strategies. But for now, Harold, can you tell us what are the 2 to 3 most common submission missteps that you still see even from talented creators, and how would you fix those?
So I would actually say the biggest submission misstep that I see, at least the most consequential, is not going out on submission at all.
Oh.
Folks who either hesitate or just think they're not ready, and they're working on manuscripts and they're working with a critique group and they're doing all those things, and they just don't jump in and start getting their manuscript out into the world. Another one, and I actually think sometimes the psychology underneath is similar, are folks who, when they're going out on submission, they rush. They just want to get it over with. And so they don't. You guys are smiling and nodding. I guess you.
Oh, yeah.
I felt that way before. Anyone else? Yeah.
That they just rush to get together a list of possible agents and hurry to write a query letter and just get the manuscript out there just so they can get it done. And what I advise people to do, and this is just anyone really, but it helps with these two issues in particular, is make submissions part of your writing process, right? That once you get to the point where you've learned the skills you need as a writer and you're producing manuscripts consistently, that your critique group or whoever it is you check with says, yeah, these are ready to go out, you add submissions to the process that you go through of ideas, drafting, revising, polishing. Ding, it's done. And now it goes out into the world. And it just becomes a routine. And you build up research. You're doing research all the time, even while you're writing, because you're paying attention to what's going on. And you're following possible agents. You're taking note of interviews when they come out and things like that. And so some of that's just happening in the background. And then when you get to the point where, yes, you're done with this particular manuscript and you want to get it out to the right people, you make sure to go through the right process to actually do that. And then you see what kind of reactions you get and you decide what you need to do next. But if you conceptualize it as submissions are part of the writing process, then it becomes, I think, just a little bit less challenging.
I like that. Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes you feel like you're not missing out on that you should be doing something else because it is
Right,
part you make it part of the process. That's great.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Harold, you said passion plus fit beats trend chasing
Yeah,
when you submit. So,
yeah.
how does a writer test editor and agent fits before they hit send on their
Well,
email?
actually, I have a somewhat maybe contrarian response to that. I don't think you can fully test fit before you hit send. Yes, you should definitely look and see what somebody's doing in terms of manuscript wish list and publishers marketplace and any interviews or other things you can find out about them, even in the best of all possible worlds, actually hear them speak. But a lot of the folks that you're going to draw up when you're coming up with a list of 10 people you want to submit to, you're going to find varying amounts out about different people. And you're not going to be completely sure, probably, about many of them, if any of them. And I feel, and Heather, maybe you have some thoughts about this as well, that it's after you get the indication of interest and you're talking to the editor or agent on the phone, that's when you find out about
Mm.
fit. That's when you find out how comfortable you are with them and how comfortable they are with you. And you should really see that conversation as not being just a kind of like a business transaction where you're making sure that this commercial arrangement is clear and you're comfortable with it. You're really getting to know this person you're going to be working with potentially for quite some time. You're getting to know them as a person and making sure that you feel comfortable with them.
Yeah, and not just comfortable, but that what they're gonna do with your manuscript is you're comfortable with that too.
Absolutely. It's not just about you, it's also for
The
sure.
vision
Yeah.
the vision that you have. But yeah, I agree. I think too, I can't write everything in my wish list that I think is amazing. And the other thing is some things come into my inbox that I think, wow, like this is not
Mhm.
exactly what I was looking for, but wow.
There's always it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Leave a little room for the surprise and the. So, Harold, if you were going to give us a checklist, like a submission checklist, and I really love that you say the submission should be a part of the writing process because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think as authors we always think of it that way. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a good shift for us to have. So, if you had to give us a checklist for what we're going to put in that email, like subject line, metadata, comps, word count, what would
Mm-hmm.
be on that list, a rapid fire list for 2026?
Okay. I think the kind of practical stuff that you put in a query, I think that information's out there. And I would just focus on really three things. That to me, you want to make a connection with the person you're writing to. And there are a number of different ways you can do that. It could range from, oh, I said hi to you at the local
Yeah.
Ohio conference the other day, to I see you acquired such and such for your imprint. I think that's an amazing book. It, and other things beside those. And then, as part of what you're saying about your manuscript and just giving them a feel for it,
Mhm.
try to also give a feel for you, right? Like your letter should be, it's a business letter, but it should also give us a feel for who you are. And then the third point I would make is, and this is where I think people sometimes overdo it, is the background, the biography. Really concentrate just on the essentials and the relevant stuff. It's maybe better to say too little than to say more than you need to.
I agree with that because you can always, I mean, if you're doing it right in your signature, you have links or you have people can go see your social media. I think people can go and find out about you if they're interested in the manuscript.
When you
Yeah.
were talking about making a connection, I think that's huge. And you gave great examples of appropriate things to connect with. I met you at this conference, or
Right.
I enjoyed this book. I've also had agents and editors tell me things that are not great connections. If that person is on social media talking about their cats or dogs or their family, don't tell your husband, John, hi. Like, people do those
Right.
things. And so
Right.
I guess I just wanted to bring that up, which I'm sure you've obviously seen as well, but like a professional connection, like you gave
Yeah.
an example. There's that line that's not
Yeah.
professional and somewhat creepy
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you know all the dogs and the cats in the house, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to bring a little common sense to this,
Yes.
and definitely don't be creepy. It's think about an in-person relationship, that if you're meeting somebody at a mixer in your particular business, that the small talk you would make, you would not get too personal right away.
Right.
Same thing.
Great.
Or ever.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Right. Err on the side of caution. It only takes
Right.
one creepy comment to House of Cards goes
Yeah.
down. So
Good advice.
Okay, so I'm curious about this too as an agent, but I suppose we should keep it to the submissions process for the querying writer. But if you have a project that gets soft passes, like I love the voice, but it's not right for us, is there some kind of diagnostic that you suggest before revising or before shelving it?
Yeah. Those kinds of responses are really hard, aren't they?
Yes.
They're eh,
Yes.
they're like the quote unquote champagne rejections.
yes.
These are a little briefer than that, but champagne rejections are just as bad, where someone's just gushing, but not really saying anything meaningful and not giving you any feedback that you can dig into. And that's frustrating, because if they've just said no, or if there's been a no response means no situation, there's definite lack of interest. And so you're not encouraged. The problem with these responses is they're encouraging, and you keep going. And actually, one of the things that I think you have to do is be a little tough on yourself. If you're getting some of these kind of soft responses, at a certain point, rather than going through your entire possible submissions list, which could take you months and months, right? Save yourself some time and say, you know what? 15 of these is enough. It's probably not going to be 15. It'll probably be 10 complete no's and 5 squishy ones on the side. And you just say, this is not going anywhere. I'm not getting the response I want. And I think what you then need to do, because unless you got something in mind that was bugging you before you sent it out and you really could work on, you can't just sit down and say, okay, I've got to revise this before I send it out again. And this is where you need help from other people. And one specific suggestion I would make is for people who have critique groups, and I hope everyone who's at the point where they're getting ready to go on submission is in a critique group, because that is just so useful. Critique groups can sometimes feel like they get you to a plateau. They get you to a point where they're saying, yeah, this is ready, because they're not finding anything else for you. And so you've sent it out, and it may feel like it's not going to be useful to come back to them. And maybe it's not. But some critique groups, it can be possible to go back to them and say, look, guys, we all agreed that this was ready to go out, but I'm not getting any real feedback here. I'm basically getting no's. Ask them to look at it again and really dig in and force themselves to tell you, if they had to, what possibly could be the issue. And just really encourage them to go a level deeper. Sometimes that's going to work, sometimes it's not. If that doesn't work, look for a friend who will trade a deep critique read with you. If that doesn't work, maybe then it's time to turn to a freelance editor like me. And I say that should be a kind of a last resort, because we cost money. And some people I know go to the freelance editor as a first resort. I actually don't think that's a great idea. You want to go use your resources to the extent that you can first. Not only because it's going to save you money, but because those are then resources that could actually keep working for you in the future, right? And it's all part of kind of building that. But do go and get another opinion before you send it out again.
I think that's great advice.
Me too.
Yeah.
I also
I
like,
love
Harold,
that.
that you were saying 10 or 15 rejections. And I think as we write, and they're never easy, but we get rejections just become part of the job and the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that you go for a while, right? Like you do one, because
Oh,
just a
yeah.
few rejections, right? If we're younger in our career, we're like, oh, 3 people said no, like I got to revise the whole thing. And that's not necessarily the
Yeah.
case, right? So like you need to get a bulk. And I love that you said that, because it's a good reminder. Like you need a good amount, right? Before you're going to
Yeah.
dig deep again. So
Yeah.
thanks for saying that, because I know sometimes we all need to hear it.
Yeah.
So your Who's Moving Where page tracks real time staff changes, new imprints, and consolidations.
Right.
So for us, all of us as creators, what's the smart way to use this intel?
I think I maintain it for a couple of reasons. One is it just helps me keep track of where people are. And that's something that authors can use for themselves as well, right? That any given market guide that you're relying upon gets out of date. And you can look at my Who's Moving Where page. A lot of the information I get comes from other sources. So you can also follow those other sources, like Publishers Marketplace and Publishers Weekly. But it gives you an opportunity to make notes in whatever guide you're using so that you really know what's going on. I think the second thing, though, that you can use it for is to make note, and this is particularly at the imprint level. And this was something I talked about in my workshop on publishing trends, is that if you really want to see what publishers are moving into and committing to, and that maybe is going to be a larger part of the market in the future, look and see what imprints are starting up and what their focuses are. And on the other hand, imprints that are closing and what they had been focusing on. Because, as just one example, I talked about in that workshop the rise of graphic novels and graphic format nonfiction that has just been the big market shift of the past 20 years. And you can see that in the books being published, but where you really see that this is not just a flash in the pan is that publisher after publisher over the past 20 years, starting with graphics at Scholastic and first, second at Macmillan in 2005, 2006, has started a graphic novel imprint dedicated specifically to graphic novels, not just putting a few out here and there. And that's really a sign of what publishers are planning and then actually spending money on.
Yeah, and now we're seeing a huge shift in imprints. We've had, I think, 3 new imprints now for new adult that have come
Right.
from one with Little Brown called Requited. We have Saturday Books with Macmillan. They're sprouting up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on the other hand, we're seeing not necessarily entirely imprints shutting down, but we're seeing a lot of layoffs in the school and library end of the business, the publishers that are more active in that area. And I think that's definitely a sign the library market this year. It's a little hard to see because the numbers that are being reported don't show it, but that's because the numbers are the trade sales, the bookstore sales. The library market seems to be hurting this year.
Yeah.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, speaking of all these different changes, what are some of the big changes that you have seen in publishing since you started your career?
Oh, okay. That's a whole different time frame. It's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day, again, for that trends workshop. And we often focus on the things that have happened within the business, but this is also affected by things that are happening in the society at large. And to answer your question, there are a couple of things in particular that I think have had a big impact on publishing that we don't really think about. And one of them is just the whole rise of email, that way of communicating. When I started in publishing, and this was quite a while ago, late 80s, we were still getting all our submissions. This was at Macmillan Children's Books, the very first place I worked. We were still getting all our submissions through the mail. And people were enclosing stamped self-addressed envelopes to have them sent back to them. And we were still looking at them as a publishing company, as a lot of other places were. And there's been an interesting development since then that children's agents have ended up taking on the first wave of the submissions process and taking that away from publishers, as publishers have said, no, we're not going to take submissions anymore. But what I think has enabled that has been the rise of email, because all of a sudden you don't have to type up or then print out and put in an envelope and pay the postage.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's money, and it's a lot more effort and time
A lot
spent
of time.
to send in a submission in the mail than it is to send it by email. And the rise of the time period when publishers were giving up on submissions and saying, no, let's let agents do that. It really was email that was driving that, because it just caused a flood.
Oh, yes.
The other change that I think is also related to work on computers is the rise of digital workflow. That we no longer have to like take a manuscript from somebody and then keyboard it at a typesetting house. The manuscript gets poured into a design program pretty much from the get-go and goes from there. And I think one of the things that's enabled is longer manuscripts, because you don't have to type it over and over again each time you revise. You're just working from that file and you're updating it. I don't have proof of this, but it would be really interesting to look and see when digital workflows started, before and after. Has the average length of certain kinds of books gotten longer? And maybe even in adult publishing as well as children's. I don't know. But again, that's another change that has really affected the way the whole business works.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the correlation is between fantasy. When did fantasy? Tolkien, obviously, it was pretty long already then. So
That Lord of the Rings was an
special.
exceptional
Yes,
book, but
special.
I can tell you, when I got started, publishers were not interested in fantasy, middle grade, or young adult. There'd be an occasional fantasy book published. We were actively discouraged from publishing anything at the middle grade level of greater than 160 pages.
Seems like it may be turning around, going back that direction now. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I think there's still going to be the longer ones, but maybe we'll be seeing some shorter ones now too.
So, one thing I've noticed as the industry, like you said, has been changing through digital workflows and all those kind of things and emails. And one thing I have noticed is that with all of the AI that's coming out and things that are getting used to make people more efficient, essentially, I have talked to several editors who said at their imprints or in their publishing houses in general that they are having less editors, less contract people, less workers in general. I have seen this direct impact on my authors. Their books get orphaned, books they've been developing suddenly get dropped, or there are issues that it creates with the market shrinking. And we just have less places to submit and sell to because there are just less editors to send them to.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because publishers are chasing this like big money rather than providing books that make less, even though they're needed?
There's a lot to unpack in what you're asking about. And some of this actually goes back quite a ways. Publishers have been cutting back on staff going back a long time before AI. And I think actually AI isn't having much of an impact yet in-house in terms of staffing yet. I know that publishers at the business level, the upper levels, they would love to find ways of further reducing staff using AI, just like other businesses are. But at least at the editorial level, at the working level, it doesn't seem to be happening yet, and it may never. You've probably seen some of the recent studies that have come out that show that actually companies that have been like pushing employees to use AI in their work, they're not finding that it's actually saving them any time.
Interesting.
For kind of predictable reasons, that it's not intelligent, it doesn't understand things. It's a pattern it has learned patterns, and it's therefore a
Right.
pattern creator. And what it spits back at people are things that look like the the sales information that you want, or that look like the market report that you want, but may actually be
Mm,
like off in small or maybe large ways. And then you have to correct it. And so you
right.
don't end up saving time in the end. I remember this is another consequence of the rise of email and digital workflow, that companies definitely took that as an opportunity to cut the number of assistants, right? Used to be each editor at a certain level had their own editorial assistant. Can you imagine?
That'd be awesome.
Not
Yeah.
anymore, right? There's two editorial assistants for a department of six,
Yeah.
and managing that somehow. The idea was that, oh, editors can, they should just write their own emails. They don't need to have their assistants type up their correspondence. And so it looked like they were saving money by reducing the number of editorial assistants, but they were actually asking editors to do more of their own clerical work. Is that really an efficiency? So that's one thing that's happened, and that is, it's been an ongoing thing. Publishers just keep tightening up and expecting more work out of the staff that they do have. That's been going on since I've been in the business.
Mhm.
In terms of the impact on authors, it is really tough. And when an editor is laid off or moves on and isn't replaced, then it's difficult, because there isn't that person in house to advocate for that book. And that's a really
Yeah.
important thing that an editor does. They don't just make the decision to acquire and then they do the work of developing it and quarterback it through the rest of the way, working with art directors and production managers. They're the initial person who gets the house excited, who gets the sales and marketing people excited. And if that person's gone, the book's still on the list unless they've decided to cancel it, which also happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But if the publisher's going ahead with publishing it and it's been orphaned, like you said, it's not going to have that push coming from the editorial side. And that, honestly, I think what I would say to authors who are in that situation is, maybe it'll get a good review, and maybe it'll get a starred review, and the house will like refocus on it. Don't get bent out of shape if things don't work out the way you expect them to, because it's just the reality. It's not your fault. It's just what happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's just a lot in publishing that you don't have control over
Yeah,
as much as you would like to.
yeah, exactly. And editors don't either. That
Yep.
it's the internal politics of a publisher are often quite difficult, and
Mhm.
the editors who are the most successful are the ones who are able to really work them.
That's interesting.
Let's talk a little bit about something that we can have a little bit of control over. You've been teaching revision workshops, which is something that we authors can control as our revision. You've been teaching this for about 15 years. From that experience, what are a few of the revision tools, like structural, character focused, that most improve your submission so that it's ready to go out and ability, all those good things that you want to have happen?
When I've taught workshops on revision, I usually present like a whole sort of toolbox full of possible tools. And I'll just give a couple of examples, maybe, because really the important thing is, I would encourage people to look around for revision tools and try them out. And there are a lot of different kinds. I tend to group them into the ones that are more holistic, like they're ways of looking at the manuscript as a whole, lists of key questions, and then ones that are more analytic, that have you break down the manuscript into smaller pieces to help you see what you've done in a different way. And really, that's what revision's all about. It's about seeing the manuscript again, and seeing it differently, so that you can get a different take on it than you had when you were fully immersed in the writing of it. So one of the like analytic tools that I teach, and I'll have to try to just describe this, is what I call a revision grid, which you can use to really break down everything from a picture book to a novel. looking at it scene by scene and keeping track in that grid all the different things that you want to keep track of. And some of those are basic. What kind of scene is it? Is it an action scene? Is it a dialogue scene, or one of a number of other kinds? What characters are involved in that scene? What are the key things that happen in that scene? What's the setting of that scene? And then you may have a number of other things you want to keep track of. And you just work through the whole manuscript and see what emerges. You may actually go into it with questions about something you're concerned about, and then you can make sure to focus on that. What I really like about the revision grid is that just by going through, taking the time to do it, and it can take time, especially with a longer manuscript, things emerge because you've put the story that you've written into a completely different framework. Mm-hmm. And so things that you were not seeing anymore when you're just reading it over, you see them when you put that in the grid format. And for maybe a little farther along in the process, one of the things that I always recommend, and it seems basic, but people don't always do this, it's really amazing to have someone read your manuscript aloud to you. People do read their manuscripts aloud to themselves, but it can be really amazing to have someone who hasn't seen the manuscript before. That's really crucial. Actually read it to you just cold, and you sit there with your own copy of it and make notes of the things that strike you. Now, you may not want to do that for a 200-page novel. I know at least one novelist who does this. But with a picture book, or with the 5 scenes that you're the most concerned about in that 200-page novel, absolutely.
Great suggestion.
Yeah, I love it.
So you've worked across both trade and educational spaces. So how can creators think about positioning nonfiction or info-forward fiction more broadly so it works in multiple markets?
I will say, just as a caveat to start with, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be the publisher of a large imprint, and I'd be cranking those books out, let me tell you. But I think what I would say, though, is that nonfiction in the trade market and in the library market, and to some extent in the school market, we all know just from basic experience, they're different, right? People are looking for different things. And if you look at the nonfiction that gets the sales and that gets the starred reviews and that gets the awards in the library market, it may not overlap a whole lot with what's doing the best when it comes to nonfiction in the trade market. So it's actually quite difficult to do something that's going to do well in both markets. I think to the extent that you might attempt to do something that does well in both markets, you got to keep in mind the needs of both markets, right? That in the trade market, it's got to be the kind of book that looks fun and educational and that a parent is going to just pick up and take home to their child. For the library market, it also would need to have really solid information, maybe an approach that is new and different in some way. It's got back matter. And if you can put those things together, wow. I will say I think there's some people who manage to do that. One series that comes to mind for me, and this is interesting, it's a graphic novel series, is the Nathan Hale history series. That does, I think, quite well in bookstores, and I know it does well in the library market too.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a client, Natalie Alonso, who she has a book that's doing amazing in both spaces too, and it's a nonfiction. And I think the reason is because the story is good, and she's just masterful at how she executes a nonfiction story. The illustrations are absolutely fabulous and entertaining as well, and they just catch your eye.
Is that Natalie's Roberto Clemente book?
Yes.
Yeah,
And it
that
is just
wonderful.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, the in that book are a huge part of it, but
Yeah.
she provided the space for them too.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's fun. So that's another book you could look at too for just seeing what works maybe. So, one thing that I don't really struggle with it as an agent, but it's not my favorite part of my job, is finding comparable titles. What in
Okay.
2026, what makes a comparable title helpful versus maybe not so helpful in a query? And do you have any tips for
Okay.
our audience, of course, but me too?
I gotta say, I am not a fan of comps and the need to give comps.
Interesting.
Get
Let's
that
throw
out of the
them
way.
out.
A couple things just like to say as a sort of a baseline. I think one of the difficulties when you talk about comp titles is that in publishing, we use them for two different things, right? We
Right.
use them as a way of shorthand for describing a manuscript or a book that someone's not familiar with. And
Yeah.
so we say it's like such, and it's also like such and such, and you're trying to give them a feel for the important aspects of that unknown book by reference to something that someone's hopefully likely to know. And on the other hand, we use comps to make claims about the potential sales for a given book. And that's where I got my recent experience when I was at Kane. We were distribution clients for Penguin Random House. And one of the things we had to do in their system was offer comp titles that would allow the salespeople to model in the first year. And so these were very much based upon sales. And I found this sometimes almost impossible to do because you had to do it with a book that was already in the system that you could compare it to and that you felt was actually a good match in terms of the possible sales in the first year. And a lot of time, there simply wasn't a good match. And I think that's where people sometimes kind of stumble when they're trying to come up with comps for a submission because people have gotten the idea that it's not just about describing this particular manuscript. It's about making the case that it's going to sell well. And I would actually encourage authors to put that sales part aside, that it's really more important at the submissions point to give useful comps in terms of different aspects of the book. Like, what kind of plot is it? What are you going to feel about the characters? What's the mood? All these are things that you can point to. And that's actually more important than what I see a lot of people doing is they try to find like a book that's a lot like it in just about every aspect. The main character, the plot, the themes, they're all like the same. And really, that's not what you need to do. And in fact, maybe isn't as useful. What you really want to do is find comps that will highlight the things that you think are distinctive about your book.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
And this is why something I'm always telling people they need to do, which is keep reading in the current books in the field. Because if you're not doing that, if you're not doing that from day one, 3 years later, when you finish your first manuscript and it's ready to go out, you will have no idea about what possible comps are. On the other hand, if you've been reading, let's say you're writing a chapter book series, and you've been reading chapter book series every year up until that point when you go out on submission, you've got a knowledge base you can draw on.
I think it's really great advice.
Thank you.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
makes me
And
think about
if
the
you're,
comps. I have to dig deeper.
and the other thing is, if your comparable title is way too close in so many aspects to
Mhm.
your
Yeah,
manuscript, then it becomes a competing title, and
sure.
you
That's
have just
true.
shown that there's no space in the market for
Yeah,
your book. So
Oops.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
so many of us who write in the kidlit area write in more than one genre. We may write in both middle grade and YA. Some people write in all picture book, middle grade, YA. What are some, are there different submission strategies that you should do if you are writing across genres?
I think a few basic things. Obviously, you need to make sure that the people that you're submitting to are open to authors who are not just writing within one area. They're not specialists. And I think you especially run into that with there's some agents who definitely specialize more up to the YA end. The second thing is, I would say that a lot of the research and the crafting of the query letter very similar. And there are just a couple of basic differences, and these are pretty widely known, but just to restate them, if you're a picture book writer, you have to make sure you have some other finished manuscripts ready to show, 2, 3 at least, so that the agent can see that you're not just a one book wonder. And as a picture book agent, they really want to see that you're going to be able to produce more than one book every 5 years. On the other end, at the YA level, I think the YA market gets challenging because it tends to be more commercial than middle grade and picture books.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just wise to be aware of that and to think about where your manuscript might fit in that. Is it something that actually could go out and be subject to a big auction, or is it more of a library oriented date that probably isn't going to get that kind of response? You just want to be realistic about that, because that's just the way YA is. It's got that money in it in some parts of the YA market.
Lots to think about in all these submissions, isn't there? So
Yeah.
many different aspects. Yeah.
All right, let's do the lightning round. Okay, so what is one kidlit trend that you hope sticks?
I have a very big sort of answer to that. The graphic novels. I am a big fan of graphic novels. And I think I have been since This One Summer by the Tamakis came out, which I think was maybe 2010, somewhere around there. And it was just such a wonderful book. And my daughter was at the right age for it, and we both read it. And I have very fond feelings about that book. It showed me what was possible in a graphic novel. And so I've been paying attention to graphic novels ever since and really enjoying them.
So, what one industry myth you'd retire forever?
This is something that I see happening on a kind of recurring basis, that the idea that picture books are getting shorter. And it keeps happening like over and over again as an issue. And the reality is the kind of classic picture book length, which is around 300 to 350, that's been the classic picture book length since forever. Look at Where the Wild Things Are as an example. And there are still books of that approximate length being published. What's happened, it's not that picture books are getting shorter, it's that publishers have shifted focus somewhat in terms of the kinds of picture books they want to publish and in what quantities. And there has definitely been a shift in the market into younger picture books, to even simpler picture books, shorter than that classic length. And at the same time, the picture storybook has more or less fallen out of the market. And those were those picture books that you may remember from your childhood that had a lot more text in them, but they were picture books, and they might be 1,000 words or more. And those very seldom still get published, but they used to be much more common. And part of that is that those stories have migrated into early readers and early chapter books. So if you're writing picture books, write the story that you need to tell. If you think it's too long, maybe it's not a picture book story.
Good advice.
Last but
Nikki?
not least, okay, what is your favorite resource page you wish more people used on the Purple Crayon?
Well, Heather's going to like this, because one of the resource pages that I'm really proud of on the Purple Crayon is my agents resource page. And it's actually a few different pages. I've got a page that kind of lays out the basic stuff agents do. I've got a page that helps you research them. And then I've got a few case studies that help you look at agent websites and figure out what kind of information you should be getting from them, and why you should be suspicious of a certain kind of website.
That is
And
really great info.
Yes, definitely good
That is really
advice.
good info.
Everyone go there right now when you get off.
Yeah.
Go and make sure my website doesn't have any of those.
I'm sure it doesn't. Your website and the websites of all the other agents I know are good and solid and have the kind of information they should. It's just, I, as a kind of final thought, I think people who've been in the industry for a few years, we forget what it looks like to folks just coming into it.
Yeah.
And it can be really hard to tell what is legitimate and what's not when you don't have any background. And so I think one of the things I try to do with the Purple Crayon and with the workshops I teach is to help people start building up that background knowledge that they need to have, where it's actually not hard to tell the scammers from the legitimate stuff. Once you've got that background knowledge, it's really confusing and intimidating until you have that. So yeah, so my agent's resource area, I guess you could call it, I think it's really great for people who are starting to learn and need to know the basics.
That's awesome. We will for sure put links of all those things in our show notes so that people, our listeners, can find you and find the highlights workshop page, and they can find your Purple Crayon homepage, your editorial consulting information. We definitely want to let people know how amazing you are, because I know you've helped a lot of people in this industry, including me. So
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Harold, for being with us. We appreciate your time and your wisdom and experience.
Now, I really appreciate just getting the chance to talk. It's been good.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.